I'm a student in Dr. Mudgall's SPCE 683, Section 804. Today is Saturday, January 25th, 2025, and I will now shuffle my Safmeds deck. One, two, three, and then I will cut the deck in half. Four. I have a timer set for 1 minute, and I will begin reading my terms once I start the timer. Statements describing corrective disciplinary and revocation actions depending on the circumstantial for violation of a professional disciplinary standards. Embrace the participants' values, expectations, traditions, and ideas. Cultural match. Change a contingency of reinforcement by gradually increasing the response ratio or the extent of the time interval. Schedule thinning. State, provincial, or national government document that is established by law. License. Multiple component treatment package for reducing unwanted habits. Treatment typically includes self-awareness training involving response detection and procedures for identifying events that precede and trigger the response. Habit reversal. Variety of techniques for gradually transferring stimulus control with a minimum of errors. Errorless learning. An emotional reaction of anger or frustration, including operant behavior which injures or is otherwise aversive to the controller. Counter control. 2D graph that shows relative distribution of individual measures in a data set. Data points are not connected. Scatter plot. I will set these cards aside and I will continue reading my terms. Skills are identified in sequence. Definitions for these skills should be developed and mastery criteria identified. Supervisee expectations. Supervisee goal setting. Adhere to documentation expectations. Participate in observations or rehearsals. Respond professionally to feedback. Meet performance expectations. Seek clarification. Provide supervisor with performance feedback. Supervisee expectations. Consolidates, updates, and replaces the former BA-CBS Professional Disciplinary and Ethical Standards and Guidelines for Responsible Conduct for Behavior Analysts Compliance Code. Terminal goals should reflect the reinforcement that matches the natural environment, maximize contingencies within the natural environment, as well as making consequences indiscriminable. Thinning reinforcement. An observer who is unaware of the study's purpose and/or experimental conditions in effect during given phase or observation period. Naive observer. A behavioral effect associated with abrupt increases in ratio requirements when moving from denser to thinner reinforcement schedules. Ratio strain. Allocation of responses to choices available on concurrent schedules of reinforcement. Rates of responding across choices are distributed in proportions that match the rate of reinforcement received for each choice alternative. Matching law. Performance feedback to supervisors by their supervisees related to supervision procedures. Upwards evaluations. Initial assessment of supervisee skills is critical for establishing clear goals for supervision. Interview and direct observations serve as options for this initial assessment. These methods allow for an assessment of the supervisee's knowledge and ability to perform the procedures he or she will be responsible for in job role. Supervisee initial assessment. An assessment method that includes gathering information from familiar parties, caregivers, teachers, the individual through surveys or interviews to determine what an individual might like. Indirect preference assessment. Reinforcement that requires the involvement of others. Socially mediated reinforcement. Single words or brief descriptive phrases printed along the top of the graph and parallel to the horizontal axis. Condition labels. Inadequate professional repertoire, difficulty problem solving and data-based decision making, inadequate supervisory repertoire, unethical behavior. Negative outcomes associated with failure to adhere to standards. Written guidelines that provide direction for conducting the practices associated with an organized profession and professional standards. Teach behaviors to occur with consequences which are likely to happen in the natural environment. Introduce natural maintenance contingency. Brief descriptions of the dimensions represented by and scaled along each axis labels. The environment in which something occurs, setting. A stimulus change that functions as a punisher and decreases the frequency of behavior that it proceeds as a result of evolutionary development. It does not rely on previous learned history. Primary unconditioned punisher. A schedule of reinforcement in which two or more contingents of reinforcement operate independently and simultaneously for two or more behaviors. Concurrent schedule. Use self-instruction, self-recording, set up cues, mediate, generalize. Stimulus change that follows a behavior of interest consequence. Might include a child learning curse words from peers or how to sing a song on the radio. Unplanned model. When skills trained through behavioral skills training are tested in the natural environment to allow learners to contact contingencies described in training in situ assessment. Allows the client to access the reinforcers that have previously maintained the problem behavior, alternative behaviors. Develop, improve, and maintain the behavior's analytic and ethical repertoires. Utilize behavioral case conceptualizations, problem solving, and support seeking by the supervisee. Enable high quality service delivery, improvements in client outcomes, positive outcomes associated with evidence-based supervision. Straight horizontal line that represents passage of time, aka x-axis, horizontal axis. Procedure in which a person compares her performance of a target behavior with a predetermined goal or standard, often a component of self-management. Self-evaluation. A two-dimensional graph with a logarithmic scaled y-axis so that the equal distances on the vertical axis represent changes in behavior that are of equal proportion. Semi-logarithmic charts. Vertical lines drawn upward from the horizontal axis to show points in time at which changes in independent variables occurred. Condition change line. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Empathy. Schedule of reinforcement in which reinforcement is contingent on a response being different in some specified way from previous response or a specified number of responses. Lag reinforcement. A schedule of reinforcement in which the response requirements of two or more basic schedules must be met in a specific sequence before reinforcement is delivered. SD is correlated with each component of the schedule. Chained schedule. Provide clear guidelines for their members to follow when deciding a course of proper action and conducting their professional duties. Pass. Ethical code of behavior. Vertical line drawn upward from the left-handed end of the horizontal axis, aka the y-axis, the vertical axis. Experimental design in which participants are presented with two response options. Each option is associated with distinctive SD and leads to a different set of treatment procedures. Chained schedule, concurrent chains design. The difference between the cost of a treatment or intervention and the projected benefits, cost-benefit ratio. Punishment that requires the involvement of others, socially mediated punishment. Antecedent intervention that provides a non-contingent access to preferred sources of reinforcement. Environmental enrichment. Teach behavior to occur in all settings. Sequential modification. Describe the behavior of making noises or sounds without social mediation. Vocal nonverbal. Behavior analysts are required to respect intellectual property laws by obtaining permission to use copyrighted or trademark materials and providing proper citations, attributions, or symbols, and refrain from unlawfully obtaining or disclosing proprietary information. Use of intellectual property. Designed to evoke a specific imitative response and may include teaching a child to say a word, to brush his teeth, or paint a picture. Planned models. A stimulus change that functions as a reinforcer and increases the frequency of behavior it proceeds as a result of evolutionary development. It does not rely on previous learning history. Primary unconditioned reinforcer. Voluntary credential is issued by a private organization that is authorized by members of the profession, not the government. Professional certification. Teach behaviors across multiple stimulus conditions. Train sufficient exemplars. Provides physical assistance as needed by having the instructor remain close to the learner and provide more restrictive prompting only when the learner is not responding correctly. Used for skills which require physical assistance or activities of daily living. Graduated guidance. Prior to preference assessment, potential tangibles that could act to increase future occurrences of behavior. Potential reinforcer. Occurs when the most salient component of a compound stimulus arrangement controls responding and interferes with the acquisition of stimulus control by the more relevant stimulus. Overshadowing. Describes communication through speech, vocal, verbal. An assessment method that includes gathering information via direct observation and manipulation of stimuli, including single stimulus, paired stimulus, multiple stimulus without replacement, multiple stimulus with replacement, and free operant preference assessment. Direct preference assessment. Covert events typically accessible only to the person experiencing them. Private events. That is the end of the flashcards. Here is my acceleration chart so far. I don't know if you can see it, it's a little light. I will graph today's data, send a picture, and send it along with my video. Thank you.